Okay, let's jump right in. It sounds like a massive leap, right? Connecting the ultimate, mind-bending cosmic mystery of black holes to the very real digital crisis of modern artificial intelligence. But the underlying mechanics connecting the physics of the universe to how we actually manage human organizations are absolutely fascinating. In this explainer, we're going to look at why our modern reality feels so incredibly broken, and more importantly, how we can actually architect a solution to fix it.
We start off with this really striking realization from game designer Jane McGonigal. She establishes the fundamental premise that our current reality, specifically our modern institutional and digital reality, is totally failing to capture human intent. McGonigal points out this glaring contrast. When you compare the highly engaging, meticulously tracked worlds of video games to our real-world administrative systems, well, the real world just feels dead. These systems don't capture our ambition, they ignore our resilience, and they totally miss the true value of our labor. Reality itself feels broken because the systems meant to organize it are actively losing the most important data of all, our human context. And this sets up our macro paradox perfectly. On one side, think about the physical event horizon of a black hole. On the other, the boundary of a massive modern bureaucracy. In physics, when something crosses a black hole's event horizon, it gets sucked in and only really coarse basic data, like mass and charge, slowly leaks back out as Hawking radiation. It forces us to ask a profound question. What actually happens to highly specific, complex information when it crosses that threshold? This right here is the core of the information paradox. So, the real question, and it's absolutely crucial, is whether the unique, incredibly granular information of human effort is permanently destroyed when it gets sucked into these massive, centralized systems. Think about it for a second. When you pour your passion, your hyper-local knowledge, and your unique daily effort into a massive corporate bureaucracy, does that system actually retain the essence of what you did, or does it just spit out a coarse, generalized metric, like a flat financial number or a single performance point, much like a black hole radiating away basic thermal data? It's honestly incredible how perfectly this cosmic paradox maps to our everyday institutional paradox. Just as black holes radiate away only that coarse data, massive bureaucracies reduce complex human labor into completely flat, lossy metrics. Your high-fidelity human labor, your sincerity, your teamwork, your late nights, that is the initial quantum state. The administrative hierarchy, that's the event horizon. And those standardized financial totals they spit out at the end of the quarter, that's the Hawking radiation. The rich, qualitative trust and local context that generated the initial contribution are just completely stripped away, gone.
Now, in our current digital age, this massive loss of information is driven by what the source material calls the automated miasma. Think of it like a giant data wood chipper. When you rely entirely on probabilistic AI pattern matchers to summarize or execute complex human intent, the AI doesn't genuinely understand anything. It guesses, it hallucinates, it relies on these probabilistic, lossy algorithms that actually distort your original meaning. It essentially takes the sharp, highly distinct reality of your human effort and grinds it up into a foggy, unreliable gunk.
So, how do we actually fix this? Well, we have to zoom all the way down to the foundational hardware layer. Deep inside the processor, we have to replace the chaotic FPU Gambler with the mathematically exact ALU surveyor to restore total forensic accountability right on the silicon itself. See, the floating point unit, or FPU, collapses precise numbers into rounded bins just to manage complexity. It is essentially guessing. But the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU, is our deterministic hero here. It deals strictly in exact, undeniable truths. High voltage is a 1, low voltage is a 0. 1 plus 1 is exactly 2. Every single time, on every single machine on Earth. No guesswork. But here's the real challenge. How exactly do we bridge this massive, completely alien divide between our wonderfully fluid human imagination and the completely blind, rigid exactness of the processor? On one side, we have human cognition, what the sources call OS alpha. It's warm, it's messy, and it's beautifully associative. On the other side, we have the raw electrical voltages of physical silicon, which demands cold, rigid, absolute perfection. You can't just throw fuzzy human feelings directly at a silicon chip and expect it to execute flawlessly, right? The answer is something the sources poetically call the semiotic bridge. We literally have to squeeze our messy, creative imagination through strict formatted text to safely compile human intent directly into hard physical reality. By using highly structured text, like JSON or Python scripts, we mandate absolute precision. This becomes our universal deterministic interface. It completely bypasses those sloppy AI approximations. We translate our fluid thoughts into pure, rigid text, which the ALU surveyor then executes with absolute mathematical perfection. When you step back and think about it, we are quite literally tricking rocks into thinking using lightning and text.
And to execute this whole process, we rely on the agentic mason. Because while AI is just the metabolic furnace baking the bricks, the agentic is the master builder securing those bricks into a solid, undeniable structure. We have to make a really fundamental distinction here. AI is not the house. AI just processes data into discrete units of truth. The agentic mason is the entity that takes those units and fixes them into a firm, deterministic layer. The human orchestrates the architecture, the AI bakes the bricks, and the agentic mason actually lays the masonry to fix reality. So what's the mortar holding all this masonry together? It's the record of sweat. This is the visceral, cryptographic proof that actual biological human horsepower was undeniably at the wheel. You simply cannot sever the intent of a digital mission from the literal physical calories burned to execute it. This record mathematically proves, all the way out at the very edges of the network, that real human effort took place. It permanently anchors the bit-perfect truth in a non-halting system, meaning we never have to blindly trust the probabilistic guessing machine ever again. To really grasp the sheer, mind-blowing scale of this modern orchestration, consider this fact from the sources. A recent sovereign swarm processed a staggering 55.5 million tokens of metabolic flux. 55.5 million? It is a literal digital monument to human effort. That number represents the raw computational energy, the actual digital sweat required to verify reality and push a human pilot's intent completely across the network. This isn't just a fun theoretical concept. It's an undeniable mathematical record of immense scale that is permanently etched into the global ledger. But this massive scale isn't just floating in the cloud. It's grounded in highly specific local execution. It proves that the digital mission simply cannot be severed from the physical substrate and the human pilot's deliberate forensic strikes. The sources document a 581-kilometer physical execution strike, accompanied by exactly 66 manual interventions from the human pilot to forcefully bend the scripter back toward the mandate. This explicitly rejects what the text calls agentic kingship, that opaque, centralized control of cloud AI that we've all gotten so used to. Instead, it demands local execution, strictly anchored by human hands. Now, as these autonomous systems grow, they maintain their stability using LIFO logic, establishing a deterministic elegance that prevents infinite recursive loops from just tearing the whole system apart. Imagine a highly efficient bouncer at a club who only needs to look at the ID of the person standing directly in front of them to figure out the current absolute state of the line. LIFO, last in, first out, means the system only checks the most recent entry. This safely enables infinite context AI inference without the non-halting system ever crashing or drifting into those messy hallucinations. Okay, so when we combine this deterministic LIFO logic with our record of sweat, we arrive at something truly mind-bending, the quantum Hall effect for governance. We are literally taking a mathematical principle straight from condensed matter physics and applying it directly to institutional design. In physics, the quantum Hall effect creates one-way edge channels that conduct current with zero resistance, completely immune to local impurities. If we apply this dynamically to governance, we create an institutional framework that uses uncertainty as a generative force, rather than hopelessly trying to regulate it away with rigid, backward-looking rules. It's pretty amazing how beautifully these concepts map to each other. Just as topological insulators route around physical impurities without losing any energy, these newly structured cybernetic institutions can route around local administrative failures without destroying the overarching human intent. A quantized Hall resistance translates into unalterable, code-enforced organizational constitutions. Those dissipationless edge channels, they become protected one-way administrative workflows. So, if a localized subunit of the institution experiences a failure or a sudden regulatory shock, the primary operational flow doesn't collapse. It simply routes around the disrupted node, preserving the system's absolute structural integrity. So as we step into this wild, completely new agentic era, the choice is entirely yours. The tools are open sourced and the infrastructure is already there waiting. You can either passively absorb the failures of unpredictable AI, acting as a mere moral crumple zone for the machines, or you can cross the semiotic bridge, generate your own undeniable record of sweat, and architect the future right out at the edge of the network. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. The real question is, what are you going to build? I'll see you next time.